Hello students, today I wish to wind up the discussion on the history of English literature. Let's see whether we succeed in this task or not. So I was talking about the Gothic literature. Well, it was during the Romantic period that Gothic literature was born. Traits of Gothic literature are dark and gloomy setting, and characters and situations that are fantastic, grotesque, wild, savage, mysterious and often melodramatic. Two of the famous Gothic novelists are Annie Radcliffe and Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Now I will talk about the Victorian literature. The Victorian period of English literature began with the accession of Queen Victoria to the throne of England in 1837. This period lasted until her death in 1901. Because the Victorian period of English literature spans over 6 decades, the year 1870 is often used to divide the era into early Victorian and later Victorian period. In general, Victorian literature deals with issues and problems of the contemporary England. Some contemporary issues that the Victorians dealt with include the social, the economic, the religious, the intellectual issues and problems surrounding the Industrial Revolution, growing class tensions, the early feminist movement, pressures towards political and social reform, and the impact of Charles Darwin. His theory of evolution on philosophy and religion. Charles Darwin's impact on philosophy and religion was very strong. Some of the most recognized authors of the Victorian era include Lord Tennyson, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, her husband Robert Browning, Matthew Arnold, Charles Dickens, Charlotte Bronte, and George Eliot, and Thomas Hardy. It was in the Victorian era, 1837 to 1901, that the novel became the leading literary genre in English. Women played an important part in this rising popularity, both as authors and readers. And monthly serializing of fiction also encouraged this surge in popularity of the novel writing. Victorian novelists tend to be idealized portraits of difficult lives in which hard work, perseverance, love, and luck win out in the end. They were usually inclined towards being of improving nature with a central moral lesson at the heart. The reclaiming of the past was a major part of Victorian literature and was to be found both in classical literature and also the medieval literature of England. The Victorians loved the heroic, the chivalrous stories of kings of old, and they hoped to regain some of that noble, courtly behavior and impress it upon the people, both at home and in the wider empire. If one studies possibly all the great writers of this period, one will mark three general characteristics of this literature. Firstly, literature in the Victorian age tended to come face to face with realism. They accepted realism. They sought to represent the realities of life in their fictional works, like in their novels, in their stories. This reflected more on practical problems and interests. It becomes a powerful instrument for human progress. Secondly, the Victorian literature seems to deviate from the strict principles of art for art's sake and asserts its moral purpose. They believed that literature is not for art's sake. They did not believe in simply in presenting a fictional life, an ideal life, away from the realities of the world. They sought to educate the people through literature. Within the Victorian period, two other literary movements, that of Pre-Raphaelite movement, which began in 1848 and ended in 1860, and the movement of Aestheticism and Decadence, which began in 1880 and lasted till 1900, gained prominence. In 1848, a group of English artists, including Dante, Gabriel, Rossetti, formed the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. It was the aim of the group to return painting to a style of truthfulness, a style of simplicity, a style of religious devotion that had regained prior to Raphael and the high Italian Renaissance. Rossetti and his literary circle, which included his sister Christiana, incorporated these ideals into their literature, and the result was that the literary movement, pre-Raphaelite movement, this movement came into existence. So this is a special thing of this era, Victorian era. The aestheticism. Now I will talk about aestheticism. The aestheticism and decadence movement of English literature grew out of the French movement of the same name, aesthetic movement. The aesthetic movement, also known as art for art's sake, premeditated British culture during the later part of the 19th century. The authors of this movement encouraged experimentation and held the view that art totally opposed to natural norms of morality. This style of literature opposed the dominance of a specific thinking and defied the hostility of society to any art that was not useful or did not teach moral values. They believed that all literature for art's sake was not praiseworthy. It was from the moment of aestheticism and decadence that the phrase art for art's sake emerged. The movement blossomed into a cult devoted to the creation of beauty in all avenues of life, from art literature. In literature, aestheticism was championed by Oscar Wilde and the poet like Algernon Swinburne. So these people, these writers, supported the movement, or we can say were the prominent figures of this movement. Which movement? Decadent literature or art for art's sake movement.